hello everybody, and welcome to the Metapod, the Pokemon TCG podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. I never say that. That's not something that Jake usually covers that part, so this was a weird one for me. But today, as all of you can see, we are not joined by Jake. We are instead joined by Zach Lesage, Pokemon player, creator extraordinaire. Zach, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
How's it going, peeps? How's it going, Sean? It's one of those things where I'm super happy to be here. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll give everyone a bit of a Zach Lesage in a nutshell. Been playing the game since 2005. That's when I got my first Worlds invites. And since 2017-ish, so for the past 5 or so years, I've played Pokemon and done Pokemon content creation as my full-time job. In some capacity, that is. It's one of those things where over the past year or so, I really pushed for my own YouTube, and kind of the pandemic made things easier and more difficult in a lot of ways. But yeah, we're almost pushing 10K subs on YouTube now, so I'm pretty hyped about that. And yeah, I mean, I was able to win the Players Cup 2. That was kind of cool too. So really hoping for some competitive Pokemon coming back. We'll maybe see how that comes out for the Team Challenge 3. I'm deciding if I want to play in the Team Challenge 3 or not, but we can dive into that another day. That being said, I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, I think we have a lot of great topics to discuss.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And yeah, I think we talked about it briefly. Like our last episode was the Brilliant Stars like set review, if you will. I don't think we technically have the full official set list, but like it's mostly like Starbirth and VMAX Climax stuff. So we looked at mostly the Starbirth cards because those are the ones that are going to be the most impactful. But yeah, today we wanted to bring Zach on because, you know, as a longtime Pokemon player at a very high competitive level and, you know, deck builder, content creator, wanted to get your perspective on what the new set means from like actually like constructing decks. Like what, you know, how will Brilliant Stars change the meta? You know, what decks are going to be uplifted? What decks might be pushed out? All that good stuff. And before we started recording, we even chatted like, you know, spoiler, we both feel like Brilliant Stars could be a shining light, hopefully. So, yeah. So I guess just to jump into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to have any cards on screen. For those of you who are watching this on the YouTubes, I will describe what the cards do when we bring them up, but I'm not going to switch over to a separate screen for that. But I wanted to quickly mention one little news story that came out is that we will be getting V-Star markers in the packs, which is nice because, like, you know, Zach, you remember the GX markers? Like, you had to like buy an ETB to technically get
like one of the like expensive tins or something like that. Yeah. And I mean, I could totally imagine being like 10 years old and being like, Mom, all my friends have GX markers. I don't. She's like, we have GX markers at home, and brings out like a piece of bread or something. I honestly don't know. Like, it's one of those things where, without going too much into it, I think I'm for it. We'll see after I open probably too many Brilliant Stars packs. And I'm like, oh, I can't even sell these as bulk? What?
Yeah, and it will literally be like code cards that have no code card, no codes on it. So you're just kind of like, what is this little piece of paper? I have 1,000 of them now.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I have like bricks of energies that I just like have like all around here. And I'm like, I'm sure I'll get rid of them one day. And I mean, I build enough proxy decks and write on energies all the time where I'm just like, you want to know what? I think a V-Star marker sounds cool. Thinking about it like more realistically, like in a world where leagues are more flourishing with players and stuff like that, you could be like, oh, I forgot my V-Star. You can go support your local game store and buy a pack and hopefully pull a V-Star marker, or maybe someone always has one in their binder, or they're more accessible for tournament organizers when it comes to regionals and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of cool things. I don't know if you ever saw those Japanese GX marker sleeves. They have them where it's like it said GX marker on the sleeves, and most player would have their favorite Pokemon on one side, have it on the other side. But I mean, they've always in Japan, they've always had this idea of like them being card size. So I think this might be taking it to that next level.
Interesting. No, I haven't seen that, and I mean, it will be
I'll
interesting.
You a pick.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see. I think if it is just like a straight up thing that says V-Star on it, or what I would really actually like for them to do. We have no idea. I don't know if they'll do this, but I would actually love for them to have commissioned artists for each set to have like 4 different V-Star markers that use like different artwork or characters or whatever. And so like it's unique. Like, so you can bring an Arceus themed V-Star marker, you know, or a Shaymin. Like, that could be cool. Like, I think about like Magic the Gathering has a lot of like interesting proxies and tokens and all of that stuff. And oh yeah, Zach is showing me the GX. Yeah, they're just sleeves that say GX on the back, so you could just.
I mean, that's kind of cool. And then you put your Pokemon on the other side, so maybe we'll see something like. I like your idea of like. I think that sounds really cool, and maybe they will be Arceus V-Star themed or something like we see with the play mats or something like that. That'd be really cool, and I'm sure it wouldn't be ridiculous for them to print, but. I don't know. I'm sure we'll probably get some misprint or some PSA 10 V-Star marker.
Yes.
And all the collectors go crazy. They're like, new V-Star. Like, what the heck? I don't know. It's one of those things where I read through the Pokemon Center like review, and I was like, okay, cool. You want to know what? They're changing it up. I think we're open for change.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I like the idea of a Charizard V-Star marker PSA 10 going for $500 or some nonsense. We'll see. That's when you know that they've really jumped the shark in the PSA world. Yeah. So I guess we can just get into it. So Zach, before we get into individual decks, I know that there has been a lot of discussion about like how good of a set Fusion Strike actually ended up being. And that's not a judgment. That's just like the general, like, is it good or is it not? And then like sort of comparing that to Brilliant Stars. How would you say that, broadly speaking, competitive players in the community are viewing these two sets, and how do you view these two?
Well, I mean, I think it's a tough one because I think Fusion Strike actually brought on a lot of competitiveness in the game. We have Mew VMAX, which is a lot of players have marked as a tier 0 deck, more than tier 1 or anything else like that. I think Mew is really approached best deck in format status, and Mew VMAX might be one of the best decks of all time. I often bring it up because I do my weekly top 10 videos, and I'm like, name a deck that can accelerate energies, has free retreat, can copy all these different attacks, has its own busted draw engine. Like Genesect drawing 20 cards a turn is gross. Can regenerate those energies back, can heal itself, putting itself back in the deck. And there's so many other things like gusting up your opponent's Pokemon, searching anything out of your deck on a coin flip, turn 1 knockouts with Meloetta for 210 plus. And I mean, we don't have anything else in the format that's like Electro Power. So having power tablets, being able to accelerate that damage output is crazy. So Mew is largely the most competitive deck we've seen since Cosmic Eclipse 80 PGX, kind of. I'd say that something like that is very comparable. Beyond that, like the next step down is like we've had Gengar VMAX. I'm a personal Gengar VMAX lover, but it's one of those things where I'm one of the few, and I've definitely had to. I've been met with pitchforks when I throw out that thing. I mean, I still won a few Gengar tournaments, not the biggest ones, but they've been in the 30 to 50 player range. But beyond that, I mean, there's really not much else from the set that's been like crazy good. It's more or less like Mew was brought to us. The set is filled with a bunch of filler Vs and stuff like that, and it was weird, right? Like, I think even if I go to my local game store, do I really want to buy a box and pull a Greninja V or Brilliant Stars, on the other hand, seems a little bit more refreshing. There's a lot of concepts that players who have played over the past 5 years would be excited to know that are coming back. So double Turbo Energy is almost spiritual reprint of double Colorless. Seems very format appropriate. I think for myself, I've largely been known as the guy that plays fire-type Pokemon at events. So having things like Magma Basin to accelerate energies and Kindler and stuff like that, those are really welcome to the game. I think Arceus V-Star breathes life into a lot of dead decks. Talking about a card that might be able to compete with Mew VMAX seems really interesting. And then we have Choice Band reprint as Choice Belt. And there's so many things that I could just go on and on. So I think Brilliant Stars, while the set is, how do I put it? It doesn't have that gigantic oomph like Mew VMAX. It's spread more evenly throughout the set. So it's kind of like a deck builder's paradise compared to if you skipped Pokemon for 3 months, you could pick up Mew VMAX and be back on track. I think Brilliant Stars is really going to be the set that's going to have us picking our brains for the next year plus. And it seems really like very much like a Sword and Shield base set, where at first glance we didn't even understand how good the set was, and then you look back in a whole other year when the rotation happens, and you're like, man, Barrel's cool. Man, this new Minchino's bussin'. Like, there's so many cool little things that get added into the decks. So if I were to compare the two, I don't even know if they're comparable. I might have to give it to Fusion Strike, though. I don't know if there's anything that might be able to match Mew VMAX. It's a bit of a hot take, but I've covered the two upcoming variants of Mew VMAX, where it's like, yeah, you get double turbo energy to attack for one attachment, or you might just be like, I'm going to forego all basic energies and just attack with double turbo energy and be able to find them. So, I mean, I think that Mew VMAX, like, still just, like, there's nothing that keeps it in check. And even no matter how hard we try, like, I bring it up every single week, I'm like, every other deck tries to counter Mew VMAX right now in our Fusion Strike format, and Mew VMAX is still the #1 performing deck regardless. I don't know how much that changes, although I am super excited about Arceus V-Star.
Yeah. No, I think you're right on the money that, like, Fusion Strike just felt like we have one deck that is just absolutely insane, and it's nicely packaged. It's the set is the deck is the set, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
if the deck had been bad, right? Like, I'm thinking about Rayquaza VMAX is like a deck that everybody was like, oh, this deck should be good, maybe. And then it just fell flat. Nobody won. If Mew VMAX had done that, I think the entire set would be a write-off for Pokemon. But obviously that didn't happen. But Brilliant Stars, I think to your point, as a more long-term competitive player, you look at that set and you're like, there's just so much value at all the levels, right? Like the trainers, the trainers are not sort of generically... They're not specifically.
It's not Elephant and Sparkles, right?
Yeah.
Like Elephant and Sparkles, like you look at it, because I was looking through Brilliant Stars and I'm like, oh, what cool Fusion Strike Pokemon. Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say nothing because we don't know the full set, and I know that there's a looming Ice Cube that I don't know how we're ever going to get, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I wonder what cool cards we could get, kind of like Mewtwo and Mew GX, and I like adding to like my little army of Pokemon that I can copy. Nothing. Mew VMAX is Mew VMAX, and Genesect and Meloetta is where it's at, apparently. So I feel you there, where it's like Acerola opens up a world for colorless type Pokemon.
Yeah.
Is it Ace? No, it's Charon's Care.
But I mean, it's basically Acerola for colorless.
There's also an Acerola, I think, in the set, right? There's a different.
Let me check real quick.
It's hard because like the set's like I look at the set list and PokeBeach says that it's going to be Start Deck 100 cards. Or will we assume some of the Start Deck 100 cards that aren't direct reprints, and maybe some that are direct reprints? Then it's going to be the Starbirth sets, and then I think some cards from VMAX Climax, but I'm also not sure about what. Like, it's still really confusing, and the set's coming out in
3 weeks.
Yeah, it's tough.
I'm with you. It's been a little weird. The last few sets have been like, because of the Start Deck 100 and all the different specialty sets in the last year, like each new Western, I should say, like main set just kind of feels like a strange hodgepodge.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
I kind of really wish we could switch over to Japan structure of,
yeah,
it would be so much nicer, especially on a monthly basis, because I feel like right now I'm already a month out covering out Brilliant Stars format stuff because the Fusion Strike format has largely been solved.
Yeah. The answer, Mew VMAX, and if not Mew VMAX, maybe Duraludon VMAX or Jolteon or
anything that counters Mew VMAX,
or Sableye.
You hope you do okay against the field. So
exactly. All right. Well, I guess we can get into then, like, you know, Jake and I have talked a little bit about some of the individual cards and whether or not we think they're cool, but are there any net new decks that you are really excited about for Brilliant Stars?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of it's a combination of decks that are new or decks that are like returning or that it got kind of clipped due to rotation, right? So personally, I think Mad Party coming back is really exciting. I think seeing Togekiss coming out really out of its shell for the first time with double turbo energy, like these are things where I'm like, oh, these decks that were always like fringe or like were really bad because we got that stuff coming, coming back, I guess, is really the way that I look at it. Even like Scorch might be good again, and I know a lot of people really like that deck. So it brings back a bunch of old decks. Now, when it comes to new decks, I think Arceus variants is really where the set is at. There's really, like, the more and more that I look at it, there's less and less of the sets, and it's more like Arceus can fit into every deck. I don't know if you looked at any of the early Japanese lists.
I haven't, no. So, yeah, I guess let's get into Arceus, because that's like it's the poster child, if you will, of the set. And I know a lot of people are like, so for those of you who are listening and haven't listened to the other podcast, quick update on what Arceus V-Star is. It's the new evolution mechanic. 280 HP. It's an evolution from Arceus V. For 3 colorless, you do 200 damage, and you can search your deck for 3 basic energies and attach them to your Pokemon V in any way you like. So a spiritual successor to Arceus Dialga Palkia Tag Team, kind of.
Yep.
And then the V-Star ability, which you can only use once per game, just lets you search your deck for 2 cards. I mean, that's pretty insane. And
that ability is like absolutely cracked. Like, just to put a little bit, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna use it to get bosses orders and this for game. I'm like, I've done a little bit of tabletop gameplay with the Shuffle Squad, and I'm like, you know how many times like I just dead draw turn 2, and I'm like, oh cool, I could evolve, and then I'm going to use Starbirth and be like, oh, I don't lose this game. Like, that's a big thing that a lot of people don't realize, is like, you lose a lot of games just by not setting up. You're the salmon that got ripped by the bear swimming up the stream. And I mean, Arceus is like, nah, homie, I'm gonna give you another chance at life here. Just choose the professor's research. Choose the Crobat V from your deck. So I think there's a lot of utilities there, and I think that card's really good. Also, to anyone else who's listening, the Arceus V has an attack for 2 colorless energies. And that's really what starts a lot of decks off. So for a double turbo energy attachment, so double turbo allows you to attach to any of your Pokemon. You do -20. You could rip it on there, and it has the same attack, except it does 0 damage. So for the single double turbo energy attachment, you get to search up to 3 basic energies, attach them to your Pokemon V, however you like, and that could really get your deck kickstarted. My first build of the deck is inspired by my homie PJ's Dark build on it. So I really like the Umbreon V Max, the Hoopa V. Ooh. So you have access to a Dark Psychic Pokemon to counter those fighting Pokemon. I like those kind of aspects when it comes to the Arceus V-Star, but my Charizard V-Star deck has Arceus V-Star in it. My Raichu deck, I need to add Arceus in there. Just because you need the energy acceleration in this format. I think Muse almost made it to that point where Arceus is going to be needed in almost every single deck.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like Arceus V, not even the V-Star, right? Just the double colorless attachment, turbo out 3 basic energies to, and I think that's one of the things that Dark decks have sometimes struggled with for a long time. Even when Weavile GX was in the format, which allowed you to attach basic Dark for free, that still wasn't enough. And now that you have a Pokemon like Mew VMAX, which is weak to Dark, and you're like, Dark should be good, but it still has some energy acceleration issues. Yeah, this might be
it solves a lot of issues for a lot of decks, and allows, like, you got to think about how many decks that just can't compete with Mew right now might be able to toss that in for a double turbo energy. If they are able to do that, we'll have to figure out which decks work and not. I think that's really where does Arceus work? Where does it not work is really the big question. So even like in my early Scorch build, I'm like, you want to maybe putting double turbo energy in this deck, or Magma Basin energy switch, something. Like, we still got to find other ways to make it work, because we have a lot of ways to get it off the ground early enough, and having access to search your deck for anything you want, because those 2 cards that you search for could be cross switcher early on. Yeah. They could be anything, right? Like, I don't want to go through a whole list of things, but there's so many powerful cards. Like, look at any World Championship finals, and the caster's like, whoa, they ripped the Guzma off the top of their deck. Wow. You could just search for it, fans. Yeah. Like, that's the way that I'm looking at it. It's just like, I don't want to be top deck mode. I search for this. I plan this 5 turns in advance kind of mode. I'm playing chess if the rest of y'all want to play like Uno or some stuff, right? Like, I think Arceus allows you to do that. So it might, if decks are more stable, the game becomes more skill based. I think it brings a lot of skill.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And it's also, because it's only a 2-prizer on top of a 2-prizer,
That's huge. Like
yeah.
V-Stars are 2 prize cards.
Yeah. And so that I think will definitely probably be a long-term boon to the game, because I think the 3 prize, format we've been in now since 2019, I think a lot of longtime players have kind of feel like this is maybe a bit much. Can we reel it back and make it not a 3-turn game?
It's gross, right? Like, I was literally in the YouTube comment section. They're like, Zach, has weakness ever been this bad before? Or is it just due to 3 prize cards? And I'm like, wow, I've never thought of it like that. That's really bad. Yeah. Like, there's so many times your Pikarom deck just hit a fighting type deck and you're like, what the heck? You're like, I'm just out of this game. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Okay, so obviously Arceus V and V-Star are kind of the ultimate toolbox. It may very well be that Arceus V in some ways becomes a Zoroark GX like card.
Yes, I very much think that's a great comparison.
Yeah. And for those, again, newer Pokemon players who don't know, Zoroark had an ability that lets you draw cards, and you could stack those abilities, which is gross.
Kind of like a stacked Minccino.
Yeah.
Or from the set, Leopard.
Yeah.
Leopard's a spiritual reprint.
And then
pick 1, draw 2. Good.
And then, like, the perfect thing about Zoroark is it had an attack that wasn't, outrageously powerful, but it was powerful enough, and it basically could pair with almost anything that you wanted to build it around.
Decidueye, Buzzwole, Zoroark Control. Like, there was Zoro kind of checkmate. There's all these different kind of takes on it, and I think Arceus, that's a really smart comparison. I'm gonna steal that one for myself. Absolutely
go
wrong.
For it. Steal away. In terms of other like net new, you mentioned, I think everybody out there is gonna wonder, am I gonna need to refinance my mortgage to get a play set of Charizard V-Stars? So from your play testing thus far, do you think there is a viable Charizard V-Star that exists in the world, in the meta?
It's good, but it's not like, I think so I had the same discussion for myself when Darkness Ablaze came out and we had the Charizard VMAX, and that's back when we had Welder and we had all these other things, and I was like, dang, I could actually see this card being good. And the sad part is, like, the card's good in that deck too. Like, my Charizard V-Star deck has Charizard VMAX in it. So for anyone who wants to bling their deck out, you could be real poor real quick. In all seriousness, I don't feel like it's as good as other variants. That's for my very early testing, and I do want to put that out there. I'm going to save myself some embarrassment later if this card wins Worlds, if we ever get to that point. But it is one of those things where it is competitive. I think if you are a Charizard fan, that you can play this deck. I think that this deck has the ability to win some events. But, like, right now, we have a lack of in real life events. The card's literally going to be pennies to the dime to pick up on PTCGO when it comes to codes. So I think what I'd recommend to anyone doing is build the deck proxy version right now, or build it on PTCGO, PTCG Live, whatever, how that's going to come out. Test the deck, see if you like it. I think it's cool. I don't think it's the coolest deck I've seen. There's a lot of other decks that I'd rather focus my expertise on. I think Centiskorch VMAX might be a better deck if you play with the Arceus style. I think that Entei V with Ludicolo might be a better deck. Like, I think it's one of those things where I'm not sure. Although I think, have Arceus been pretty expensive in the past too? I'm low-key worried about that card just being, like, playable, legendary. I'm sure there's probably some new hype with the new Legends of Arceus game coming out. There's a whole bunch of factors there that really scare me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the benefit of Arceus is, unlike Zoroark, going back to that comparison, with Zoro, you typically, I think, wanted to play a full 4, because the more trades, the ability that you draw more cards, the more of those you could get online, the better you are, because you have card advantage. But because Arceus V-Star doesn't quite have the same thing, maybe a 2-2 line is
a lot of decks want to play the 4 of the Vs. Well, just so you can get that first attack off.
Yeah, fair. You might play
because
4.
It's just like the ideal starter where you're just like, the same way in other formats where you play Jirachi or something, you're like, turn 1, if I attach double turbo energy and rip 5 energy attachments on my first turn, so 2 from the double turbo, 3 from the attack, that's a pretty, like, big, like, foot in the door in a lot of games. So, and then There are some decks that run like just a 2/2 line that they're like, you want to know what? We can use it. We don't need to necessarily use it. There's a lot of. It's interesting. I think we're going to see everything in between. It might even be something similar to where when we saw Tord playing 4 Tapu Lele GX at some point, where it's like we might see the full 4/4 going throughout the towards the end of it. Like I just updated my buy list and I was like, I thought I only needed 3. I could totally see myself needing 4.
I think, yeah, because you have so many decks that are probably going to use it, if you want to have multiple decks built, it will, I think, become a very expensive part of a collection, a player's collection. Because if you want to have 3 or 4 decks built at the same time, it may be that each deck needs...
Fingers crossed we got this one promo version or like some kind of something. But if you want to ball out, those gold ones look really cool too.
They do. They look nice. So... I guess, okay, Charizard V, V-Star. In terms of all of the other ones, do either of the other V-Stars seem particularly interesting to you, or are they kind of...
the other ones that we have?
Shaymin and
I said Charizard's good. Arceus is, like, very, very good, like, must-have. Charizard's, like, if your wallet's good for it, you're okay, but if not, like...
You can have
chill
some,
on it for a bit.
You can have some fun with it.
Whimsicott's, like... cool, but I think Whimsicott seems pretty lackluster overall. It is a card that might be able to grow with age, but right now the only thing that I could see powering it up is Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, which has largely become like a tier 2.5 3 deck since Mew VMAX. When you're weak to dark and your main like Whimsicott's not weak to dark. I don't want anyone to be like, LOL, Zach, you were wrong. Like, I know it's weak to metal, guys. I literally play Pokemon for a living. Thank you. I definitely made a few mistakes, but I just want to throw that out there. Whimsicott is being played in a deck that is predominantly weak to dark. And Mew VMAX definitely has some goon counters out there that are trying to rob it blinds. So if you're only as good as your engine, Whimsicott to me seems like it's probably going to crash and burn. Could be cool, and it might breathe some life into an older deck. Like, it's really not bad. I just don't think it does anything. It kind of has the Chaos Wheel kind of thing from Giratina EX, where it blocks, special energies, and is that what it is? I just want to make sure that
if the defending Pokemon is basic, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn, is the Whimsicott V.
Okay, the Whimsicott V I felt was pretty irrelevant for the Whimsicott V Max. I think it's Psychic Colorless does 160.
Yes, and no Pokemon tools or special energy from the hand.
Okay, it's special energy and tool, not stadiums. Either way,
I mean, it's not nothing.
Cool-ish.
Yeah.
In some ways, though, there's a lot of like you got to understand that in the same way that we're talking about Arceus, I do want to throw out there that Arceus attaches basic energies, like double turbo energies at the start of the game. It's attaching basic energies. So in any format, like you can see, like Duraludon's probably like from this past Fusion Strike format. Even though it didn't come out in Fusion Strike, it came out in Evolving Skies, but it's only been relevant in the past a little bit. With all these basic energies coming out, it's probably not a good card to continue on with. It's cool, it's not bad, but just because double turbo energy comes out doesn't mean that the format doesn't kind of mold around other things. So just throwing that out there, that special energies might be less important when you get the Whimsicott attacking. And the snipe attack's cool, but it's like, as a V-Star ability, attack...
Yeah, I agree. It's like a once per game attack, 60 for each energy attached to this Pokemon. I personally wish it would have been 60 for each energy attached to all of your Pokemon once per game.
That'd be crazy, right? And I think we'd be looking at this card really differently. And I'd be like, once during your game, you could beam something off the face of the planet. And if your opponent has Manaphy, it's balanced, right? Like, I'm just like, there's definitely been way worse. Like, Mew VMAX turn 1 with Meloetta swinging for 240. That could be a V-Star ability, and I'd still play it.
Yeah.
What's the other one that we have coming out? Shaymin. Shaymin to me is the only one where I talked to all my homies. We tried to make decks around everything because as a content creator, I want to like, if you open up a box of Brilliant Stars, I want you to be able to go to my channel, no matter what level of competitive player you are, and be like, you want to know what? Zach covered this deck. I think I could build this deck, or at least play with my friends, and I have an understanding of what a core for a Shaymin deck would look like. I cannot find many redeemable qualities for that card right now. I think it just doesn't seem good at all. Like, it was like okay, but it just it seems like kind of a worse baby Galarian Moltres in a lot of ways because you have to evolve, and there were so many like barriers to entry. So like, if the right deck can play it, I think it's cool. But I was like, what deck's going to play it? Leafeon VMAX, maybe? That's already, again, tier 2, tier 3 status. Yeah. So I think Whimsicott and Shaymin definitely got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, I agree. I think grass type Pokemon in general, like you had Leafeon has put in a little bit of work in specific metas, but broadly speaking, grass type Pokemon have just, for the whole time I've been playing, never been particularly relevant. And the fact that the V-Star ability, it heals such a small amount of damage given how hard things are hitting, that like all you're really doing is, if you're a spread type archetype, right? If that's what your opponent is, you're basically saying, hey, once per game, I'm gonna reset the clock on you.
But like in the future, like that's a fair point. Like if spread is bigger or gets better, I think it's really cool, right? Like I think I like abilities like this. It's better than having an attack that does 50, like if there's like a floats, like I don't know, whatever. A Pokemon in the set that does like 50 and then 100, and then there's no flavor text, no nothing, right? Like I'd rather have the Shaymin V-Star in there as filler than another Greninja V, another Tyranitar V.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems pretty not great. Also, if anyone out there is also wondering, we're getting the Leafeon V-Star promo and the Glaceon V-Star promo, like literally in the next week or so, maybe a week or two from here. Leafeon V-Star has a boss-like V-Star ability that you could bring up one of your Pokemon that might breathe some life into Leafeon VMAX. Decks. Glaceon very much seems like it's should not be seeing too much play. It seems okay. A lot of people have been like, "Oh, have you thought of it?" And I'm like it's great. We don't need to dive too much more into there, but I do want to say that there are like 2 other V-Star Pokemon floating, and that's how we're getting them promo-wise. If anyone's listening about that or wondering about that.
Yes, it's not. I mean, yeah, it's not on the list because it's not in Brilliant Stars. It is a promo. Interesting. Outside of all that, I think for me, like when I looked at it in terms of like archetypes, like full decks, Raichu V did seem interesting.
I like it.
Yeah, when Jake and I talked about this, it felt, and we said like it feels like Blacephalon GX in a modern era. And I know, Zach, you were a Blacephalon stan.
I like me some Blacephalon.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you think?
It's cool.
Yeah.
Like I built a build without Arceus, and then afterwards I'm like, I should just be playing Arceus with this. Arceus brings the energies into play. Raichu finds a way to dispose of those energies. So I can either be hitting for the consistent 200 or I guess 180 with the double turbo energy negative damage. So I could be 2-shotting those V-Maxes or 2-shotting those V-Stars. And then if I want to have a Raichu board filled up, that I have a few Raichus powered up, I already powered them up with Arceus V-Star, and I have the ability to search my deck for whatever cards I want. So I can now, on that last turn of the game, I could search for Boss and a Choice Band or a Choice Belt or whatever. It seems like, again, like that's a card that I think is cool with Arceus, and I think it's just probably going to be Arceus Lightning type. Yeah. The way that I thought about it, I was driving around the other day, and I was like, I think it's kind of cool that like Arceus in the video games has all these plate attachments. To anyone who listens into that lore, and it almost feels the same in Pokemon for the first time ever, because we've had a few Arceus. We've literally had a set called Arceus before. This is a set that I think Arceus is going to have a dark type build with like Umbreon or Galarian Moltres. I think it's going to have a lightning type build with Raichu and maybe a Raikou and Flaffy. I think there's the Charizard build where it's fire type. I think there's a lot of just random builds for that deck, and I looked at these Japanese things. My buddy PJ from the Shuffle Squad shot me a message, and he's like, did you see the results from this Japanese events? Because they still have a lot of like tiny store events and stuff like that and doing in real life. And Arceus was like in every single deck, like a sea of like every list had a minimum 2/2. But it doesn't feel bad. It's kind of like when we had ADP GX and Cosmic Eclipse, a lot of players were like, wow, this card's really cool. And then we didn't realize how degen it got.
Yeah.
Because it got like ADP GX turn 1 was gross, and then you're pretty much out of the game 2 turns later. Very similar to me VMAX, but that's another story. It is one of those things where there was a lot of cool decks too that people forget to remember, where it's like we had ADP Guzzlord and ADP people were just trying all these cool things to like make some single prize card decks better. I think Arceus makes a lot of these like mid-tier or like almost very playable V Pokemon playable. So like my Raichu deck, I look at my early list again, and I mean like a lot of early content, I look back and I'm like, you want to know what? that list could have been a little bit better. This could have been that. And I use it as a way to brainstorm. I think that like Arceus makes that a potential tier 1 deck, like legitimately. And I think we're in a world where you could almost pair Arceus with almost any deck. And it seems really good. The same way that we had formats where you put 4 Jirachi from Team Up in your deck, or you put whatever in your deck, and that's just your thing. I think Arceus might just take up those spots in a lot of these decks.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how prevalent it becomes, because I think your point of like it's 2 colorless to attach 3 basics to any of your Pokemon V in any way that you like, and you can do that turn 1 with
there's
new
so
cards.
Much strategy too. Like there's think about like all the choosing, like just choosing the correct Pokemon. Like I could just see the Channel Fireball article now. How to attach those energies, which Pokemon do you attach to? Because a lot of people think that they just like they go all in, attach 3 energies to the Pokemon they're going to attack to. That Pokemon gets bossed up and it's over, man. And then even like attaching 2 energies, but in a world where you're double turbo energy, like it's a discussion on how to attach those energies. Like seriously, like it sounds so stupid. Like, and people are probably gonna be like, Zach, it's attaching it. It's way more in depth than you think it is.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to a deck like Raichu, and where you want to preserve energies on board. You got to keep those energies safe because that's part of your strategy. So I think Raichu allows you to do that.
That's great strategy out there for the listeners too, because I think the really nice thing about Raichu V is they made its attack 2 lightning. Like if they made it 2 lightning colorless, I think that it becomes way less playable, because strategically you can attach 1 lightning to each, like to like a Raichu V, and whatever, right? It doesn't matter.
A Lumineon V on the bench, just so that they don't ever bring that one up. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But then you've like, what is the phrase I'm looking for? You are minimizing your losses from an economic standpoint.
Sure.
I think that's how a lot of players early, like, you know, that are starting out, that's how you lose a lot of games, is you don't take into account like, hey, it's a risk assessment thing that my opponent is doing. And if they see all the energy go to one thing, it's an easy calculation to be like, yes, I killed the one thing, and then we're good.
You gotta play hard to get when it comes to Pokemon. Right. Make your opponent fight tooth and nail for every single prize card. Do not give it all to them on the first date, okay? Like we're definitely taking a step back here and being like, we're spreading it thin here.
Yeah,
we're not making that big target. So I don't know. I guess to answer it, I think that Raichu seems cool. Definitely gives me Blounds vibes, Blacephalon GX vibes. I mean, it's one of those decks that's on my to-do list of cutting out on proxies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I do think it's good if that Blacephalon GX, like literally just to give anyone a perspective, won me $10,000+ in tournament play in a span of like maybe 3 months. So that's pretty good when we put it into Pokemon money. I think anyone who has their hobby be able to give them like 10K is pretty sick. That card winning that amount of tournaments, I think that Raichu could probably do very similarly. Maybe not to the same level of Blacephalon, because that was a whole Ultra Beast package. Yeah. But I think that Raichu seems really good. Having anything that can OHKO anything that is accessible is very good. And we already know Arceus V-Star is good too. So like we don't need to debate that fact. Yeah. I think that Raichu seems very good.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, with the new essentially choice band reprint coming out, the extra 30, like 5 energy. All you need, like Blacephalon GX didn't really have an easy 5 energy Oko.
And it was only drawing 2. That's a format where it was largely in a 2 prize card format too. Like it was half 2 prize card format in Lost Thunder, and then everything else came out in Team Up. But no, Raichu seems really good.
So that for me, that's why I'm excited, because you're playing a deck that like, hey, I can output the damage of a 3 prize deck, but do it as a 2 prize deck. And it's like, if you're not going to play this 2 prize game with me, I will outpace you in that prize race, most likely.
Well, and just like a hot tip to anyone who's like, whether you're listening for this set or you want something in the back of your head for when we have our next set in Pokemon, look for cards that are similar to cards that have been successful in the past. So if we see cards like Double Colorless Energy is a World Championship winning card. Choice Band is a World Championship winning card. Blacephalon GX won multiple regional championships and has seen a lot of success throughout its course, came second at Worlds. If cards are very similar, there's a good chance that history will repeat itself. things that have once been might be again if we have the right circumstances under it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good way to look at the set where you're like, huh, this Charon's Care is really similar to Acerola. Do we think this is playable? The answer's probably right in front of your face. So when it comes to things like Raichu, of course Raichu is going to see some level of success. It might not be the most successful deck ever, but I think it's one of those things where it has to see success.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of looking back to the past and all that, then I think we can go towards what decks do you think are going to get a boost? Like existing decks that you think some of the new cards here either make it viable for, you know, the first time in their playability. I think you mentioned Togekiss, but you know, decks that are already good that just feels like, hey, this is just more good for something that didn't need it.
Okay, so like, yeah, Togekiss is probably the first one where we've seen a few Togekiss builds with like Melanie and stuff to try to build up those two energies, but largely its attack's been a little bit too low, or there wasn't enough cool cards to search out, or whatever. I think that deck's really cool. I put up a really weird build on my channel. I have this idea of playing a bunch of different supporters in it, searching out all these situations to kind of put your opponent where you could infinitely heal yourself. And if they don't do anything, that you could eventually run them out of energies or resources. I'm thinking about like a 30-plus player turn game. In Pokemon games, when there's Mew VMAX and you're looking at a 4 or 5 turn game, maybe if you're lucky, I think playing 20 to 30 turns sounds really cool. I'm not sure if it's going to end up working out because it's never seen success before. And that's but we'll see. Maybe Double Turbo Energy is going to be a little bit better for that deck. Mad Party seems really cool coming back. I know a lot of players like that.
So what does Mad Party? That was, I think the Togekiss, the reason it is good is the
Double Turbo.
Energy, Double Turbo, and also Sharon's Care.
That's a very good card. Very, very good card.
Yeah. But for Mad Party, I didn't immediately see what made Mad Party.
Okay. So we got Ultra Ball back too. That's a card that we probably failed to mention a few times. So we have ways to search out our different Mad Party Pokemon, and we have ways to discard Mad Party cards from our hands. So discarding cards is very good in Pokemon. If anyone plays Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, anything else, discarding cards is really bad in those games. But Pokemon has such crazy draw power that the way that I look at it, Yu-Gi-Oh has Pot of Greed, and Pot of Greed's been banned, or I think it's still banned. And that's draw 2. That would be a terrible card. We would laugh at it. We would spit on it. We wouldn't even put it in the binder. It'd be thrown in the garbage immediately. That's how bad it is in Pokemon. So discarding cards is great. We want to discard our Mad Party Pokemon. Ultra Ball works well. We get Collapse Stadium. Collapse Stadium is very similar to Parallel City to anyone who's been playing for the past 10 years or so. But you're allowed to have, you limit each player to 4 bench Pokemon. And if you have more than 4, you discard first. So you could discard Pokemon like Crobat or Lumineon from play, turn your deck back into a single prize card deck. Similar to how Mad Party had Giovanni's Exile back in the day to discard your Pokemon. We have Double Turbo Energy that allows us to have those extra energies. So when Mad Party was tier 1-ish deck, we had Triple Acceleration Energy. Double Turbo is kind of a better version of that in some ways. And we have Roseanne's Backup that allows us to get back our energies. So Roseanne's Backup is choose up to 4 cards, or choose up to 4 of these options, which is really cool. I'm a huge advocate of choice in Pokemon. So you could shuffle back a Pokemon, you could shuffle back any energy, including special energies, a Pokemon tool, which can get us back Choice Belt as well in this deck, and a Stadium card, which can get us back Collapse Stadium. So we have ways to kind of discard our 2 prize card Pokemon, like Crobat that we don't want on the field, force our opponent to draw more prize cards, make our Mad Party attack do more damage, get our energies back if we were a little bit, if we weren't as resourceful early on in the game.
I mean, sometimes you have a bad opening hand where you have a research and like 3 of your energies, your special energies, you're like, oh gosh.
Old Mad Party world, right? Yeah. So I don't want to say like Mad Party is going to be busted, but I do think it's cool that a deck like that can come back. A deck that never really had a chance to shine as well is Durant's. Durant in this format, we had a Durant deck from, I want to say Noble Victories. I could be wrong. If anyone, you said this is going up on YouTube, right? If anyone wants to go in the comments, let us know when it was, when we had
Durant. Good Durant.
The good Durant come out from. The one that won like a few state championships back in, geez, I want to say 2014. No, not even 2014. It was a while ago. Okay, 2012, 2013 seasons. Anyways, it's one of those things where having some kind of mill deck in format could be really cool. And that works with double turbo. So I think like the story here is any deck that costs 2 colorless energies that might not have been good or might have been good before, look into those decks. Those decks are really cool. I think any fire deck that was good with Welder before, now we have Magma Base, and that might make it pretty cool. So Centiskorch VMAX might be coming back. It's a way to power up Entei V, kind of a spiritual, I'm not successor, spiritual reprints or a copycat of the Suicune V deck that's been tearing up the game right now. Charizard V-Star can also work well with Magma Basin, so like it's a cool card. Other returning decks, I mean, or any deck that's still good or gets anything to, I think Gengar VMAX might be the
with
time
Arceus?
to shine.
With the Arceus, right?
Yeah, because people, when they look at Pokemon V, they're like, oh, it's just Pokemon V. No, it's V-Star, V-Max, V-Union, just regular Pokemon V, or whatever else they decide to come out with in the next year. Gengar V might be like just running through these decks, because I'm looking at like what an Arceus V-Star deck might look like. If you got 4 Pokemon on the bench, I'm swinging 242 energies, add my 2 strong energies, 280 for 2 is gross.
Yeah, that's very true.
And you should beat Mew VMAX. Like, I think that's really one of the few decks that I think, as long as you get set up, which is the same thing for every deck, as long as you get set up, I think you beat Mew VMAX. So having an 80% win percentage against Mew VMAX sounds great. Like, I think like if anyone told you that in this format, you'd be like, awesome. And then probably doing well against Arceus V-Star and all that stuff. Like, I don't know, it seems really good to me. Mew VMAX gets buffed, unfortunately, for a lot of people. So I know a lot of y'all hate that stuff, but Mew VMAX seems cool. With double turbo energy, I already brought up, a lot of people are like, do you think Collapse Stadium sucks? And I think Collapse Stadium is good. You just pitch a Mew VMAX off the face of the planet. You're still drawing 5 with Genesect, and then you can get those cards back with Roseanne's backup and just put them back into your deck. And I mean, I'm sure Mew VMAX, we're already used to Path, so it is a way to bump Path. It is like we could probably play another stadium to bump that as well, and we could get that stadium back with Roseanne's backup as well. So I don't know. I think that Mew VMAX gained a lot, especially Choice Belt. Choice Belt's gross.
Yeah, I think the Mew VMAX does the Choice Belt reprint. Helps it quite a lot. And yeah, to your point earlier, you were like, there's no Fusion Strike in here. And I'm like, Mew VMAX doesn't need it. It's good enough. Like, yeah,
it definitely got a lot. We don't need like a Genesect VMAX or Genesect V-Star or something coming out, right? Like, I think we're okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of any other decks that
Malamar. I think Malamar from Chilling Reign gets a little bit better.
Okay, yeah,
because there's that new Minccino that has a Call for Family type attack.
Okay, yeah.
So even looking at like the Pokemon that aren't necessarily like a huge buff, there's a lot of little things in there where that's the better Minccino now. We now have a Call for Family-esque Chinchino, which really plays nicely. Like, there's so many times where I play Malamar, you go Minccino pass, and you're like, awesome. Here, at least you have an opportunity to search for some other Pokemon and get a little bit more like scraping from the deck, a little bit here and there. So I think that's a really cool way to look at the deck. I'm trying to think about, I think Eternatus VMAX gets better. That's another one that I want to bring up. So there's that Leopard that we get from the Star Deck 100 portion, which is exactly like Zoroark GX's trade.
Okay.
So you get to pitch a card, draw 2, but it's Dark type. So it works well with Eternal Zone. And I mean, Etern's largely been inconsistent, but getting access to Ultra Ball in the set, searching through things. I think V-Unions that we have in general, we have a few promo ones. Pikachu V-Union, Greninja V-Union, Mewtwo V-Union, Zacian V-Union. They could become better because we never had a way to directly search them. I don't know if you saw any of the early PokeTuber content where it was like people who were, oh, we can use Familiar Bell to search this. Like, okay, like, homie, that's not going to work. Like, Professor Burnett is like the only way that we have to discard. Like, it was gross, right? Like,
Arceus V-Star can do that now. Like, you can go get
Arceus V-Star can do that. I mean, Quick Ball can discard some pieces. You have Ultra Ball that can search them out as well, because Ultra Ball doesn't see any difference between Pokemon. We have like that's like the core like understanding of the game, where it's just like it could search out a Pokemon, and V-Unions just fell into this category that we're just like, we couldn't really search them out. So I thought that's pretty cool.
Interesting.
And I think it's definitely something huge. I'm trying to think about what else. I think I have a folder of deck ideas. Some here. I'm just gonna.
I remember your folders of deck ideas. That you're a big G Drive proponent in that respect.
Yeah, well, I switch it over to Discord now, but
yeah. I mean, the only other, I think the one deck that I don't know if it actually gets any better, but Rayquaza VMAX. I mean, I feel like with Arceus V-Star and the Arceus, of the first attack, right? Maybe it doesn't matter, but I'm thinking a 330 HP beast.
Sounds cool.
I mean,
I don't think it sounds bad. I mean, we got to look at it the same way. Raichu might just be better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Raichu may be better.
Ray is 20 plus 80, right?
I'd have to, let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, I think I need to refresh me on Ray. I think it's 20 base damage, 80, and it's fire and it's lightning, and you have to discard the energies off the Ray.
Yeah, 20 plus 80 times. And
Raichu is 60 times off anything off the board.
And it's from this Pokemon. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Raichu V from this set does anywhere off your board, but Ray is 20 plus 80. Like when I was advocating for Ray early on, I think I was one of the few people that got duped into thinking he was really good. I think I spent the 200 packs online to get the full playset of the alt arts, and day one I was trying to show people until I realized that it was only off the Ray, and I was like, oh, this is not Blacephalon. I was very wrong. I think where I was wrong there, Raichu is just a better version because you don't have to evolve it. It only plays one energy type. And that's not to say that Ray's unplayable. I think Ray could be playable, and the way that you're saying it sounds cool. There's some buffs that you get with Ray too, right? It's a VMAX, so you could use it with Rose.
Yeah.
Raichu you can't use with Rose. So like there is a world where it might be better. I don't see a world where it is better though, because Raichu, like when you have to play other things, like when Pokemon forces you to be like, oh, so your 60 card deck is now limited to having evolution Pokemon, ways to search out those evolution Pokemon, different typed energies. So if you want to do something else with this Pokemon, I think that's really where it gets bad.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like you are only 320 HP. No, you don't have weakness. But like
ability is cool.
Yeah. But like Charizard V-Star, other cards are going to be able to probably OHKO you Raichu V. Exactly. And you're just
UV-Max can also OHKO you with some power taps.
Yep. And you're just sort of sitting here like, this is a lot of commitment just to get OHKO'd. And I'm like, no, thank you. I'm going to pass.
Another returning deck that I think is really cool is the Sableye V Galarian Weezing deck that's been seeing a lot of success in our Fusion Strike format. So the list largely remains untouched. But what it does gain, it gains the new Manaphy. And the Manaphy is similar to a Mew from Unbroken Bonds that has bench barrier. So you can stop the spread damage from the Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX and Jolteon VMAX and stuff like that. And a lot of people are like, but wait, Manaphy, you could just boss that up, or you can maybe be able to quick shooting it off. And I'm like, yeah, you want to know what? That's true. But considering the Sableye deck has Clara and can get it back a few times, I think that's really where its two worst matchups were. If you look at the Limitless data for those matchups, if I'm able to Clara that Manaphy back, you're not winning that matchup.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Manaphy, we haven't really talked about that too much, but the Manaphy also, it's huge for any decks that require some level of bench setup, especially like, the one prize weenies essentially on the bench, like the things that are easily snipeable, or it's not going to stop quick shooting Inteleon, but if they're choosing to spend 3 turns putting pings, like damage counters on your one prizers, it's like, cool, you're spending 3 turns to take 1 extra prize. I'll just take all of my prizes. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah.
It'll be, I think Sableye is definitely an interesting deck because when it came out, it was just like, oh, 2 dark energy. Oh, it's too much. It's impossible.
Oh yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's not so bad. So,
well, we got Raihan, right? Like, I think it's really one of those decks that it wasn't ever good until it collected enough cards from every single set. And now that we're there, it's just like, oh, now here's how we build it. And it's really kind of like the brainchild of like Ross Cawthon. So Ross Cawthon, as far as I know, does a lot of like Astro kind of stuff, like big brain kind of Pokemon player. There's a lot of people like, I play Pokemon for a living. I sit at home. There's some deck ideas that I cannot think of. Right, like this is the way that I like. They thought this over the pat by playing it like Sunday Open for a few weeks and failing here or there, and then won a few, and I mean, that really popped the deck off. So there's definitely some big brain players that I'm really excited to see like what they could do with this set.
So just sort of going into like the last little section here.
Sure.
What decks do you see that are going to that are likely to get pushed out of the meta? I think this is a hard one because it's so ever changing, but like if somebody was like sitting here with a bunch of packs ready to buy a deck on PTCGO or straight cash money, hoping that the IRL events are going to fire, are there any decks that they're looking at on Limitless that you're like, maybe don't buy that one?
So I think it's tough. And I do want to let everyone know that this is a grain of salt and fully have your own opinion on this. Because I don't ever want to tell someone not to buy cards when it gets better or worse or anything else like that. Like everything is the opinions of myself and not of any sponsor, employer, or anything else like that. I don't want a PTCGO store to beam me down with lightning because you want to know what I'm very much in the belief of when it comes to PTCGO, right now I pick up a playset of every single VMAX, V-Star, whatever, every kind of main ultra rare that comes out in the set and anything that looks interesting. I'm in a position where I can do that. Not every single person is, but it's definitely saved my butt a lot of times when cards get better. So Sableye V, there was a point where it was worth 1 pack because we all thought it was trash. Now online to this day, I think they're worth 10 packs each. And to someone who doesn't have 10 packs, they can't play that deck. But for me, I profited because I have my playsets. So that's the way that I've always looked at it. So I think it's worthwhile to have playsets of things whenever possible. But when it comes down to decks that fall off, I think Jolteon and Rapid Strike Urshifu take a bit of a step back because Manaphy being reintroduced into the format or a bench barrier Pokemon being reintroduced to the format is difficult. I think that's really one of those things where they're going to have their own struggles with that. That's not to say that they're completely terrible or anything else like that. I think Boss's Orders, Quick Shooting, Metacham V, using those things are really cool. So I'd say they take it like Jolteon's largely been the second best deck in format for the past like 2 months or so. I don't know if it's going to be the second best deck in the format anymore. That's kind of the way that I'd put it. It's probably like a top 10 deck, but it goes down from being the default second best deck in format to maybe a top 10 deck.
I think that's fair because, you know, if Pokemon right now is largely, it's a pace problem. And if you have to take a turn off Bosses ordering a 1 prize or whatever, it inherently puts you in a position of like, I'm now more on the back foot. And that's a hard thing. Even if you can, technically you can win those matchups, sure. But, you know, it's hard. It's harder.
What's another one? I think Turbo Zacian or Zacian Zamazenta might take a step back. Like, I know I've already covered 3 fire-type decks on my channel. There's largely not been enough fire-type decks in the formats. So I think that something like Magma Basin might make other fire decks really good. So that's probably something that Zacian V does not want to deal with, and especially a format where we can't necessarily hide weakness. Now, I know that Josh Sutherland is definitely overcome pretty much anything with that deck and literally played that Luke Metal when there was Senate Scorch in the format. So I'm sure anything I say here is not going to phase them. But I do want to throw it out there that I think fire type decks might bring that deck from a lower top 10 deck to maybe just like outside of that range. I think a lot of Arceus decks are going to like completely like go whoop, and then every decks are going to like kind of trickle down. I'm trying to think of like what everything else is. I don't think the metagame changes that much. I think we just become more of a bigger sandbox. There's more Pokemon at the playground today.
Yeah, I think that's largely what I think the last 2 sets, especially what I've noticed, that it just seems like, there's just more decks in general. Obviously, Mew being that like, it's just kind of a step above everybody else right now. But below Mew, there's just kind of a pretty wide spread of decks that you could play and do well with if you just get the right matchups on any given tournament. Okay, last thing to wrap this one up is, you know, the buy list. I know everybody's got their own buy lists, and, you know, like you were saying, if there's a specific card that anyone has their eye on, just go buy it, you know, when you can, when it makes sense. But on a broader sense of somebody who's like, okay, I want to get the main cards that are going to be good, not just for Brilliant Stars, but for the next, you know, full set of rotation.
Maybe whatever. And I mean, I do want to put out before I say anything about a buy list, I don't really look into Expanded that much. I think Expanded's largely been a format that's been forgotten about because we look at it where it's the last expanded event that we had was Dallas Regionals 2019. So that was the week after Australia Internationals, and they shut things off, I think, 2 weeks later when it came to official Pokemon play, give or take.
Just before Toronto. Big
yeah,
sad.
so yeah, exactly. I was there. I remember not being able to play as I pulled up to the hotel and non-refundable, and that was great. Thanks, guys. Whatever. No, whatever. For the safety of everyone, I'm super happy that ended up being, and I'm very much on that track. Anyways, I think Expanded just largely has not been a format since then because we haven't had a Players' Cup or Team Challenge with expanded cards. Pokemon announced their what we think might be a season if that ends up happening. I think there's a large kind of cloud of a lot of players that think that the world's in a scary enough place where things might get pulled back. No expanded regionals.
Yeah.
So we largely haven't had expanded. Like Pokemon's going to go from 2019 to 2023 without expanded. That's a bit of a time, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think there's a lot of sets, and I don't think the ban list has been properly kept up with because we haven't had play, right? So we haven't had those huge regional successes. And I think the last update was supposed to be due about a month ago, and it still hasn't been updated as far as I'm concerned. So someone should probably look into that if you're from Pokemon and listening to it. I think Expanded's always been a cool format, but I'd like it to be a little bit touched upon a bit more, or either let go of it or not. I don't know how I feel about Expanded.
It needs to be pruned.
Yeah, exactly. My Expanded, this list doesn't really factor in Expanded too much, if at all. I think that regardless of anything, there's a Grotle that comes out that searches for grass Pokemon. I think that one's pretty cool. I'll just kind of run through them. Regardless if I think it's good or not, I think Shaymin V-Star could be good in the future, and I think you could probably pick them up kind of cheap. So if you pick them up cheap, it's cool. Same thing with Charizard V and V-Star, if it's within your budget, or if you find them cheap, I think it's worthwhile. Charizard V-Star seems like the type that's probably going to come out as a promo anyways.
Maybe, maybe at some point. Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe. There's a Moltres that does 20 damage plus 70 damage if you have any damage counters on yourself. So that works out well with Magma Basin.
Yeah.
I think there's an Infernape that seems like it seems like an Andromahone kind of deck, or a Little Dark Fury kind of deck that I think might be kind of cool. I forget what it does. I think it's like 80 times the amount of energies you rip off the top of your deck or something like that.
Yeah, that
something like that. I don't remember entirely, so I think that card might be kind of fun to pick up, or it could be good in the future. There's a Pachirisu that does damage based off all the Pokemon tools that you have in play. I think that's kind of cool. There's a Dusknoir. Dusknoir has historically been pretty cool. It had an ability that was kind of solid, so I think picking up a couple of those are cool. Same thing with Whimsicott. Like the rest of the V-Stars, I think are just like, if you find them cheap enough, pick them up. I don't think it's going to be expensive. Maybe $1 for the V, $1 for the V-Star. Yeah. $2 ain't going to cost you a lot. That's cheaper than a slice of pizza or a Starbucks. There's a Lucario that's similar to Charizard that we've had in other sets where you can accelerate energies for some damage. I thought that was cool. There is Muck that works well for retreat cost-based things, I believe, where your Pokemon that are poison can't retreat. I don't know. I might be... Anyways, at the time...
These are some deep cuts.
Right? So it's interesting. What else was there? There's Honchkrow V that allows you to attach up to 4 Pokemon tools. I don't see how that card's ever going to be unplayable. It might be. I'm not sure. Flygon V could get powered up with Arceus V-Star. It does some decent damage. Kindler is a great supporter, I think, for Fire-type decks. I think it's unique for Fire-type decks. You have Cynthia's Ambition, which is a decent draw supporter. I think when it comes in general to Pokemon, pick up draw supporters, pick up any kind of item cards, because cards like that, like Cramomatic's a card that I didn't even have on my buy list for Fusion Strike, for example, and it turned out to be literally one of the best cards in the set. Like, hands down, it makes me broken. From the start deck cards, I think that these are just like the whatever list. But let's go into the must-haves, because I think that's probably what's more worthwhile. I think that the Floatzel, and I think Floatzel's the one that is the control element type cards.
Oh,
you can get back cards. I think that's cool. We didn't necessarily talk about that deck coming out, but control elements look like they're coming back in this set, which I think is a really much needed kind of archetype in Pokemon. It allows players to think outside the box, and if players have to focus on multiple different types of decks to beat, whether it's energy denial, whatever, I think it really increases the skill gap of the game. Lumineon V, great card, similar to Tapu Lele. You can get back your supporter cards or search them out of your deck, I should say. Manaphy, bench barrier type Pokemon. Bibarel, allowing you to drop until you have 5 cards. So we saw a lot of success with that. If you look towards the end of our Chilling Rain formats, we saw a lot of decks playing Silvally GX to draw cards, Dark Box. We saw Pedro Torres see success with Sendascorch. Silvally GX has the same ability as a non-GX Pokemon. Arceus V and V Star, I think, are a 4 of each. I talked about Minccino. I think that one's the best Minccino that we have, and there's already quite a few decks that have seen success with it over the past, ever since we saw Chinchino with Make Do. Ultra Ball, huge reprints. Largely one of the best things. What else do we have? We have Charon's Care for colorless type Pokemon, bringing them back to your hands. I like the reprint of Research and Boss's Orders. If you don't have those already, if you're new to the game, definitely worthwhile pickups at 4 of each, and I'm sure they're probably going to be pretty cheap too. Roseanne's Backup, being able to get back all those different types of cards, is absolutely great. Collapse Stadium, we talked about a little bit, I think is great. Magma Basin to accelerate. Double Turbo Energy, amazing. Entei and Raikou both being spiritual reprints of Suicune V. Suicune V is featured in like 3 of the top 10 decks right now, and I don't think having the exact same ability, exact same attack is ever going to be bad, especially with different types. Leopard from the Start Deck 100 seems great, because I think being able to trade and draw cards sounds good. And Team Yell's Cheer seems really good, getting back multiple supporter cards, especially when we're talking about control.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'll just sort of like end it on like control is something that you should keep an eye on. Maybe Jake and I should also have somebody like a Sander, I don't know, or somebody come on to talk
Sander
about...
probably knows way more about that deck than I like.
But I think you're right. Like, I think control, mill, like alternate win condition decks, essentially. It's something we haven't really seen much of since Sword and Shield base. And I agree that like right now, the entire format lately has just been this arms race of like consistency and power. If your deck can draw more cards and do more damage, it will be a better deck. But like all of a sudden, you get into like some control archetypes, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's really the answer to Mew VMAX, is like the right cards that can say to Mew VMAX.
I don't know what Mew's going to do against Durant, for example. Like Mew's ripping through their deck. There are 20 cards left turn 1. That sounds like a real easy matchup for Durant if Durant ever gets set up. And I mean, it's really funny to see Durant beat this tier 1, tier 0 type deck. So obviously I haven't tested that matchup enough, but it's one of those things where off the top of my head, I think it could definitely be cool. Yeah.
Well, Zach, thank you once again for joining me and going over all the good stuff for Brilliant Stars. Just if you want to plug any of your channels, I guess now is the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, for sure. So if you ever want to catch up with me on any kind of Pokemon content, I do have my YouTube channel, Zach Lesage, really easy to remember. So check me out there for the most, I like to say the most competitive content available. I really try to focus on that. When it comes to early deck profiles, I try to cover a little bit of everything, but I really like to get into the nitty gritty. My Monday top 10 decks, I think, are a staple in the community if you want to learn a little bit more about Pokemon. So check those out. You can follow me on Twitter. The ad's right below here at Zach Lesage PTCG. Yeah, exactly. I never know where to point when it comes to these things. But, I also run tournaments on the Play Limitless platform. So I currently run the largest Pokemon tournaments in the game, the Late Night Series, on Mondays. So I think it's worthwhile to check out there too if you want to get into the game. If you ever have any questions, you can DM me on Twitter, Discord, hit me up on YouTube. I get back to every single person.
Yep. And if you're listening to this, a few weeks in the future after Brilliant Stars has come out, you can listen to this and then you can go look at Zach's tournaments on Limitless to actually see what Arceus version decks are controlling the format.
For sure.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess we'll sign off now. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast that evolves around the evolving meta, and we will see you next week. Jake should be back.